Welcome back to the Joe Miller Show, KON Hot Talk, 1080 AM, 95.1 FM. This show is made possible by my friends at the McPherson Tax Defense Group, 1-800-BEAT-IRS, beatirs.com. That's B-E-A-T, IRS, fighting the modern-day Gestapo. We have with us Peter Schiff. He, of course, is an American financial analyst, stockbroker, author. He was a Senate candidate, and he's also the CEO and chief global strategist for Euro-Pacific Capital. Has a website, Shift Gold. Peter, thank you for coming on the Joe Miller Show.
Oh, thanks for having me on your show.
So what caught my eye the other day, I was looking at MSNBC, CNBC. I don't really look at those sites very often, but you made a comment that the markets are whistling past a graveyard, that effectively we're in a very deep recession, maybe one of the worst in the last several decades. Tell our listeners about where you see us at economically right now, whether there's any way out.
Well, unfortunately, there's not at this point. The conventional wisdom is that the Federal Reserve basically saved us from what could have been something that may have been worse than the Great Depression when the financial crisis hit, that somehow the financial crisis resulted from a lack of oversight on Wall Street and too much greed run amok, and that Ben Bernanke and now Janet Yellen, the policies that they implemented saved us, and now the economy is back to normal. They've healed us, and everything is fine, and the crisis has passed. And that narrative couldn't be further from the truth. What actually happened is the Federal Reserve caused the 2008 financial crisis, and the same monetary policy that led to that crisis is what's leading to the next one that's going to be even worse. And in fact, I think that crisis has already begun, and I think the recession that is going to follow has already begun. And I think the recession that we're now entering into is going to be longer and deeper than the Great Recession of 2008, 2009, which, of course, was the worst recession since the Great Depression. This one has the potential of being not only worse than that one, but worse than the Great Depression. And it's because of all the things the Federal Reserve has done in the last 7 years, which have exacerbated the problems that created the last crisis. They haven't saved us from anything. They haven't cured the economy, right? We're sicker than ever. All of the problems were exacerbated by 7 years of 0% interest rates and 3 rounds of quantitative easing. And now that the Fed is trying to take away all that monetary stimulus, they're going to reveal all of the damage that has taken place while we were all, under the intoxicating effects of all that cheap money.
So, I mean, in part, are you saying this because of what we've seen over the last several weeks? I mean, the losses, the huge losses that global markets have endured.
I've been saying this before. I predicted that these losses were coming. I said that if the Federal Reserve actually pricked its own bubble by raising interest rates, the stock market would tank, and they would push the economy into recession even quicker than otherwise would have been the case had they not raised rates. But, now you have a lot of people claiming that, hey, the Fed made a mistake. They moved rates up too quickly. That wasn't their mistake. The mistake was lowering them in the first place. Once they made that mistake, it didn't matter when they raised interest rates because it was going to collapse the bubble. So the mistake was going to zero, not raising them. But it was also a mistake to believe that you could raise the rates without producing another crisis, because we're going to have a bigger crisis than the last one because we have a lot more debt than we had last time.
What should just an average everyday guy or gal out there that has, just a little bit of money in the market do? I mean, are you recommending a significant shift over to commodities, or what's your perspective?
Yeah, I think if somebody has a little bit of money in the market, they're going to have a lot less if they don't do something. But more importantly, the money itself is going to lose value. I think that is the greatest opportunity right now that investors have, is this sucker's rally in the dollar. Because so many people were convinced that the U.S. economy was sound and that the Fed would be able to normalize interest rates and shrink its balance sheet, you've had this huge rally in the dollar. And I think this is the bigger sucker's rally of all time. I think the dollar is headed for a collapse. But in the interim, before it happens, it gives Americans a window of opportunity to use those overvalued dollars, and before they collapse, to buy assets in other countries, to buy, invest in Singapore or New Zealand or Switzerland, or to buy gold, and to buy gold stocks, which are really on sale at prices, particularly in the gold mining sector, that I never thought I'd see again. Prices are, cheaper than they were 15 years ago when gold was under $300 an ounce. Even though gold was $1,100, there are many gold stocks that have fallen 50, 60, 70, 80% below where they were when gold was at $300. So, these are prices that we've never seen in history as far as how cheap you can get some of these stocks. So I think there's a huge opportunity for people who act quickly. And I don't know how much longer the opportunity is going to last. Every morning that I wake up, and the dollar hasn't collapsed is really a gift to the people who still own dollars. And so I would encourage people to do something sooner because there may not be a later.
So kind of take a 100,000-foot view on this. A lot of people will argue, and this is kind of a double advocate's perspective on this, that the United States, because, its debt is secure, it will never default, it can always print the money, that it is always a safe haven for the world's money, and that we don't have to worry about what happens to the United States because of that. Why do you think that those naysayers, at least as far as their perspective of further decline, why do you think they're wrong?
Well, because the fact that we can print our own money, that is the problem. That's not some kind of get-out-of-jail-free card. I mean, that's no reason to feel that the debt is riskless. Because the problem is what happens when nobody wants that money? Because the money doesn't have any intrinsic value. It all depends on people's confidence. And if we have to start printing lots and lots of money to repay our debt, and all of a sudden prices start to rise and the dollar starts to fall, and our creditors realize that they're getting paid back in money of diminished value, then you get a currency collapse. You get a currency crisis. It doesn't matter if you get paid in full if you can't buy anything with the money. Right? I mean, so that's ultimately what's going to happen. And because we have massive amounts of debt that we can't afford to repay, the government has eviscerated the labor force, so the tax base is gone. We have massive trade deficits and budget deficits, and we have to borrow trillions and trillions of dollars from the rest of the world on an annual basis, and we can never pay it back. And we depend on the world not figuring this out to be able to be willing to lend us money indefinitely. And I don't believe the world is that charitable. They don't want to give us this money. They only want to lend it. When they realize that these are really gifts, not loans, because it's impossible for us to ever pay back, this thing is going to end, just like any Ponzi scheme. Just ask Bernie Madoff. I mean, these things don't work. They can work for a while. We're pulling off the biggest Ponzi scheme in the history of the world, but that doesn't mean that we're going to be able to do it indefinitely.
And there's little doubt that our competitors are trying to find a way out. I mean, Russia, China, both. Of course, China's in a bad situation now, but certainly Russia is going to want to try to get its pound of flesh sometime in the future.
Well, look, everybody is going to look for a way to get out of the dollar. I mean, we are causing tremendous problems throughout the globe. All of the main problems, financial instability problems, are the result of the dollar being the world's reserve currency and the dollar being so overvalued. And so the world is going to move away from the dollar. And right now it's mainly speculators that are pushing up the dollar. I think you've already begun the exodus. I think foreign central banks like the Chinese central bank, like the Russian central bank, are already taking advantage of the overvalued dollar, and they're starting to diminish their stockpile of U.S. dollars and U.S. treasuries. And all you have really standing between us and a complete economic meltdown are the currency speculators who just don't get it yet. But I think ultimately they will, and before they do, people should do something. And that's what I'm trying to help people do at my brokerage firm at Euro Pacific Capital. Europac.com is my website, helping people diversify into international stock portfolios. I manage mutual funds, and I help people get out of the U.S. into what I believe are the legitimate safe havens from the next financial crisis, which will be a currency crisis, and also through my gold company, Shift Gold. I'm trying to help people accumulate physical gold and silver, because I think ultimately that may be the only money that retains value here in the United States, because I think we can end up with hyperinflation in the U.S. That's probably a worst-case scenario, but between very high inflation and hyperinflation, there's still a lot of room. But even just 20-30% inflation is enough to really wipe out most of the value of the dollar.
Europac.com, ShiftGold.com. Peter Schiff, we've just got a minute left. Your prediction, do you think this big collapse, I mean, we're already in the recession, but do you think the real economic pain is going to come in the next presidential administration? And if so, what are the consequences of that?
Well, we're already feeling a lot of pain under the Obama administration, and it's just going to get worse. What might change is the government's ability to pretend that everything is great, because I think the pain is going to be so excruciating that they're not going to be able to lie about it anymore. They're not going to be able to cover it up with doctored-up government statistics to try to claim that an economy is growing when, in fact, it's been in contraction, because I think the speed of the contraction and the depth are going to accelerate dramatically, not only throughout this year, but during the term of whoever is elected president after Barack Obama.
And there's going to be a severe reaction, too. The people are going to be fed up with the ruling class and what they've led us down to, economic ruin. Peter Schiff, thank you for joining us on The Joe Miller Show. We'll have this podcast up later today. Stay with us, The Joe Miller Show. Be right back.